Excuse me, fellas, we're coming back here with a camera.
I never thought that I would get HIV. I didn't commit any gay acts with any men. I don't do no IV needles. I never did. I love women. I have an unprotected sex. I can remember when I met somebody who was HIV positive, talk about, oh, man, don't hug me. You know what I mean? Now look at me, I got it. Can you imagine how I feel inside? For real? I'm scared. I don't know what to do.
What this center allows is for people who are newly diagnosed to come through that door and gain some experience from those people who have been living with it for a period of time. We can tell you things that doctors can't tell you, that case managers can't tell you, that politicians can't tell you because they're not living with it. So I suggest that when you come through that door and you sit in these groups, you command the attention that you deserve so that you can get the information that you need. There's no need for anybody living with HIV to be walking around in this center scared.
We're here on this solemn occasion as friends and loved ones, as people living with HIV, as people living with AIDS, because Governor Ridge is creating an epidemic of death in this state that can be prevented. We're from ACT UP Philadelphia. Governor Ridge started this program called Health Choices. This program, it was discovered, was depending on saving money, particularly by cutting costs for people who are chronically ill. We are here to demand that Governor Ridge increase the capitation rate. That means pay the amount of money it takes to take care of them. Governor Ridge isn't prepared to give the Health Choices HMOs enough money to take care of people, so he told them to just take the money out of their drug program. And they know doctors will give up on prescribing these drugs, they won't have to pay the money, and people will die.
Hi, my name is Joyce Hamilton, and I'm HIV positive. Doctors are trying to help us fight this deadly virus, but Governor Ridge limited us to certain HIV and AIDS medication. I feel that Governor Ridge is trying to kill me instead of helping me along in my life.
Just in the last 4 months of our campaign, we've already got the governor to add $10.8 million to the state's AIDS drug budget. We've already gotten the governor to raise the capitation rate across the boards for health choices by 8%. We've gotten a lot of movement, but what we're doing now is we're raising the consequences of them continuing to have policies that mean that people with HIV and AIDS and other disabilities have to die. So we're getting arrested. It's very important for those people to move slowly and to not change the focus to the cops. We're not demonstrating against the cops, although we might someday. Tomorrow we're mad at Governor Ridge. That's the guy who has the power to give us what we want, and that's the focus.
This is something that I've wrestled with all week. Most of the people that are in health choices are black, and most of the people that are getting arrested are white. To me, it's embarrassing as a black person to have all my brothers and sisters out there demonstrating for health choices, and they're white people that are going to jail. You know, I'm personally embarrassed by this, and I'm a little pissed off by it too.
Everyone who put their hands up actually needs to know exactly what's going to happen, everything there is to know about the CD. I definitely like to keep the focus on what we're trying to do and not have any repercussions. But please, we should move on. I'm John H. Bell. I'm a decorated Vietnam veteran. I'm from Baltimore. I came here to detoxify from heroin, cocaine, and alcohol. I was 144 pounds and I had lost the will to live. The amount of HIV in my system and the fact that there were no medicines available to me and the fact that all my friends had died made me understand that the only course that was left for me was death. I didn't know a damn thing about activism. So I listened and I learned. When I came to ACT UP Philadelphia in 1997, there was a merge of race that allowed it to be successful. Other ACT UPs had failed across the country. All right, so we changed that. Julie Davis was my teacher. She's not HIV positive, but she put these principles down that's actually for you. Everybody has the right to live. The formula for change has to be taught and learned. Julie said, if I wasn't successful, then people was gonna die. If ACT UP is not successful, people will die. I don't want that. So my job was to see how to become an activist. I think we need to move on, but I think that what you're saying is correct. There's an emphasis for us to be on the same page. The focus of the disease is changing, so some of our tactics need to change. So I think when we interact with cops, it's a different ballgame.
Can you hear me? Yeah. The people of Philadelphia are being used as guinea pigs for this health care program called Health Choices. There are so many problems. There's not enough money, no communications, and no quick response, and that means death for others. They don't care about us, but we care. Our friends are dying and dead. Well, we're not dead, and we won't give up and just take any old treatment. Who is doing this to us? Who is killing us? Governor Ridge, we will make a noise until we are heard. I say, raise the rate before it's too late. Raise the rate before it's too late. Raise the rate before it's too late. We're not guinea pigs, we fight back. 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 All right, that's it.
Come on, you have to get another one.
That's it. That's it. Actually, the others kind of sucks. We don't want it. What do you guys think? Is this good enough? You think?
We'll give it a shot. We'll let you know.
We should probably get together after you hear this. It was a mistake that we didn't. We need to get together.
The AIDS epidemic in the black community is particularly shocking. Back in the 1980s, only a small percentage of black people had AIDS, and people saw it mainly as a white gay man's disease. But that began to change rapidly. Right now, 40% of the new AIDS cases are among black people. Should we get back to the kinds of things that we did that we knew worked with civil disobedience, protest, all kinds of demonstrations?
If we did that appropriately, some of the folks we would be doing civil disobedience against are folks who are leading the institutions that are supposed to be dealing with this issue because they're not responding in an appropriate way.
Well, Mario, I know that you've been trying to rally people, the Congressional Black Caucus, numerous other organizations. What happens?
If we had increased federal funding for needle exchange programs, we could cut the AIDS rate by 1/3 the day they started them. but yet we can't get our leaders to stand up and go protest about this. And every survey shows overwhelmingly African Americans support needle exchange programs when they're explained.
How do we get our own leadership to put it on the plate? Why not act up?
Well, I think sometimes we look in the wrong place. Sometimes we're looking for the leaders on a certain level. You don't have to have a PhD to be a leader. All you have to do is be willing to lead.
Amen.
The people that we're trying to reach in Boston are way on the other side of town. See? Dorchester, Mattapan, and Roxbury, for those of you that live in Boston. We know what's happening there. We see it. I miss the act up days. I act up all the time. You know, just give me a microphone someplace and I'll act up. You know, I educate, and it seems as though our city is not hearing it. I've been living with this disease that I know of since 1991. I've had some devastating news this week. I was diagnosed not only that I have HIV, that I have hepatitis C, and this week my doctor told me that I had cirrhosis of the liver and that I can't take any medications for it, and I can't take any medications for the AIDS. And as these three doctors sit there telling me, you know, well, Belinda, why aren't you upset? Why aren't you crying? We're just telling you that you're gonna die. And I said, well, I don't have anything to cry about. So, well, what are you gonna do? I said, I don't have to do anything. I have Jesus. When I tested positive for HIV, one of the things that I needed most was a connection with my faith community.
So what we're going to be talking about is setting up the dates for the trainings. Calendars went out.
People living with HIV have the right to be in the churches that they attended all their lives. You know, to say, this is who I am, God accepts me, you accept me.
When we go into churches and we talk about AIDS ministry, we're not talking about adding something new. We're talking about integrating it into already existing ministries. And it includes the powers that be, the folks with the money, realizing that this is a valuable piece and that it needs to be looked at and needs to be treated as such. My name is Teresa Simmons. I'm the program coordinator for Who Touched Me Ministries, founded by Belinda Dunn. It's time for our faith houses to do some work.
Reaching the ministers, what a job, what a job. First, we started just throwing it in their faces, like, this is your problem, you have to respond to us. And I found that we got more with sugar than we did with salt.
Sometimes people got to realize that in the church community, HIV and AIDS is really making a serious impact, I mean, big time. And those that know they're going to be sexually active, they should practice safer sex. Not safe sex, but safer sex. Because you know, the only safe sex you can have is no sex. All right?
I just really want to say thanks to you, Reverend Dickerson, because for years, I've been in church almost all my life, and I've lost probably over 20 people due to this virus. These were ministers, the best organists, the best singers, the best directors. And I want to know, where are their pastors?
But that's what we need to begin to think. How to get the folk here. How to get the folk here so that they can hear what they need to hear, as opposed to just if you stop sinning and you get married and stay faithful to your husband or your wife, you won't have to worry about it. Hallelujah. That's not realistic.
When you speak about AIDS, you automatically hear the issue of homosexuality. That's the biggest crisis around this issue when it comes to the church and AIDS. A sin just like any other sin, just like lying and anything else, it can be changed. It's a behavior that can be changed, and you can love them out of it, and you can teach them how to come out of it.
But Edward, everybody that is homosexual doesn't want to change. And I'd like to look at this piece here, is that whether you are homosexual or not, you still deserve prevention education if you're sitting in the church. And I'm willing to teach anybody, because if you want to be a homosexual, use a condom too. You know, it's not. It's what.
Since I am moderating, I think Belinda was moving us more into an area that we don't want to deal with. Many of you all know when Edward came to me that he had HIV. I embraced him like I embraced everybody else. Nothing changed in our relationship, okay? But then he wanted to share it with the congregation. This was going to show whether we were real Christians or whether we were just making a lot of noise.
I was at New England Medical, North Wing, 7th floor, more often than some of the people who work there. But I thank God for what God did. A couple weeks ago, the doctor called me and said, well, Burks, your viral load is going back up. It's about 2,500, and your T cells are back down to 257. I said, oh, well. And so we took a test that determines what drugs are resistant to the virus in your body. And according to her, there was not one medication on the market that would work in my body. All of a sudden, out of the clear blue. So then I said, well, let me just call Pastor and let him in on it. He said, well, Burks, you know, you ain't going nowhere. God still got some work for you to do. And I said, you're right. Well, come to find out, she looked at the test again. She says, well, there's about 7 or 8 medications here that says they're working in your body. I said, Dr. Petrarca, you told me that there was no medication that was working. Now you're telling me there's about 7 or 8 that they know that could be working. Did you not say you don't know what God would do in 24 hours? You got to have some understanding about AIDS and HIV to appreciate that testimony.
And you don't have to be afraid to step into a church and ask the minister for some support. You know, they're already giving you permission to do this work. Just call us up. Say, come out and do a workshop. They've been charged with a job from God. They have a lot on their plates, but just do like I do. Just aggravate them to death. They'll open up the doors for you. If there's anything that I could do, where's your home church? I'll go with you.
We as a church can sometimes have the biggest facade.
Right.
You know, how many can come into the church and say, this is what my issue is? How many homosexuals that's sitting in the church today that then it dies and nobody wants to say what they died from? And that's why I'm here at the table, is because my mother, who passed away of HIV and AIDS, the response was from the church. There was no response. But regardless of how she contracted it, the bottom line is, how can we love? And I believe once the church gets to that point to say, I love you, regardless of what the situation is, we're going to love you through it all and being real. And so I believe that's what we're to do. Be real.
All right.
Please hold up your unlit candles. We dedicate these candles for those who have gone before us and for all who will go before there is a cure. We dedicate these candles for those fighting their personal battle against AIDS. We hold these candles for all of the names on the quilt. And now, in a moment of solitude, please make your own personal dedication. Please light your candles as we begin our march for the rage against the dying of the life.
When I go back to when I first joined, the first few years, the people that were sitting next to me in our meetings, they're all gone. These are young men, young men. I used to know these people, didn't I? Didn't we used to sit together? Didn't we used to plan together? Where have they all gone? They're on the quilt. You know, you have to have a reason for getting out of bed, they say. The quilt is my reason. My name is Lorraine DePlazzi, and I'm a homemaker from Everett, Massachusetts. I'm a mother of 6 children, a grandmother to 10 grandchildren, and a great-grandmother to 2 children. Tommy, he was my life. He was my youngest, and you would have loved him instantly. He was handsome, smart, knew how to treat you. His mother came first in his heart all the time. I almost sometimes believe that God sent me an angel because when he was a baby, when I put him in his crib, he never cried. And I'd go in and check to see if he was breathing. Because he was such a sweet kid. He was like, no work at all. I thought, geez, this is easy. But unfortunately, it didn't turn out that way. Names Project, we make panels for people that have died of AIDS. People come to us and we have folders of pictures, material, all kind of sewing machines. It's almost like a support group because some people that come to us can't really fathom the pain that they're going through. And I found out when I first started, when I cut the material for Tommy's panel, and then I had to put his name on it. That's the thing that just tore at my heart. My son was a young man who had the whole world ahead of him. He would turn around and go out and deliberately get AIDS so he could die this horrible death and be treated like trash? I don't think so. No, the good Lord had a better job for him. The good Lord said, I'm going to take you so your mother can be a crusader. My family wasn't gung-ho when I was out there in the community, in communities of color. Well, I didn't know about the community, but I had part of the quilt with me, and that opened the door. There she is. There's Faye. Faye Simmons.
My girl.
Isn't she beautiful?
Yes.
She has a hat almost like yours.
Yeah.
She's got gold on.
Yeah. That's when they were in Jamaica, yeah. Oh, there's that thing from the Bed Rust and Breakfast.
And one young man made that, so that's 6 of his friends that passed on. And Tom and Greg.
It's beautiful.
Have you met Lorraine before?
No, this is my first time, but I feel like I know. I've been talking to her on the phone for about a month now, back and forth. She's very good and very persistent, make sure that everything is just right. So I appreciate her consistency because I've been like running crazy trying to get everything together, and she's just been great.
Okay.
They keep it in San Francisco.
Okay.
And then you have to order it, and they ship it to you. I've never done it before, but I didn't know it was quite that easy.
Okay.
You know, so I think it's great, and I'm going to start. It's time for us to start getting people together, get the churches together, and start making quilts for people that we know that have died. Of course, Faye had to pick the loudest color, so I'm going to have to do red or purple or, you know, white with sparkles on it or something.
Think about this. Can you imagine her with any other color?
No.
That's Faye.
Yeah. I miss Faye.
Tell me about Faye. Though she was ill herself, she contributed to a lot of other people dealing with the virus and not being lonely and isolated. The type of care and the sensitivity to women was just not there. So Faye and some others who were infected put together a peer-run organization, the Women of Color AIDS Council. So yes, she was known here very much so. She's worked with AIDS Action. She worked in the recovery community to make sure that people living with the virus would live with dignity.
We know that with the power of the quilt, we have a tool that helped many of us get involved, and oftentimes that common link is panel making. My name is Dwayne Kramer. I've been on the board of directors of the Names Project for the past 2.5 years. I'm a panel maker. My father died of AIDS 12 years ago. For all of 1998, I was working with the individual chapters on diversity and getting into different communities of color.
Trying to get in to talk to another person about their losses can be very hard.
We've all been in presentation where someone's talking to an audience and you're like, that isn't me. This quilt isn't me. I can't tell you, traveling across the country and being embarrassed when, you know, I'm in Lochapoka, Alabama, this poor African-American community. They fly in some white older gentleman from Birmingham to talk to these young middle school and high school students, and they're looking at like this man like, you don't look like me, and AIDS isn't affecting my community. And I got up and I said, this is my father on the quilt. I'm HIV positive, and you know what? This number of people in your community are living with AIDS and HIV. Specific numbers. And so you have got to find the people that can talk to the audience.
Now they say, let someone else do it. But there isn't anyone out there to do it.
You can see, if it was some entertainer, they would be here, but it's about AIDS and the people out here.
You know, it's here, and it's loud and clear, and it's beautiful, so we'll pull them in. We'll keep pulling them in.
This is what I'm saying, we got to do more than one-shot deals. People think you do something one time and it doesn't work.
No,
you got to keep going, you got to keep going.
And that's what's important.
I was glad Belinda called me, and I wish Belinda would call me more about it. Maybe if I was a churchgoer and I went to different churches, I don't know how I got this job. I mean, if it was picked or chose by me, it'd be one thing, but it just feels that I'm needed in the spot I'm in.
Reverend, I saw you on TV after church the other Sunday, and another young lady, I have it written down, but I can't remember her name.
Belinda Dunn.
Yes. I put all this down and got in touch with one of the members of the Ransom Missionary Unit, Virginia Lee. We have started things that we want to make a quilt because we know that there are members of this church that have lost people with AIDS. We want to invite the community. That's a start here at Charles Street Church. And Reverend Gruber has given us our blessings too, and he will be working with us. Thank you.
If we can be effective of those within our body who are willing to come out, who have lost loved ones, and just start a quilt piece, and and that way it can just start for those who can be like, well, yes, I've been churching, you've been churching, so we come together and bring a quilt piece to share with one another. I mean, that was good. That was.
Yeah, that was. Yeah.
Pastor Thomas.
I hear what we're saying here, but we're not saying anything. We're talking to each other.
That's right.
And we might as well start talking to somebody else. You know what I mean? Right. Just get down with a pastor because we're going to have to get this in the church, and we're going to have to get it through the pastors.
I'm Eric Sawyer, and I'm one of the founding members of ACT UP New York, and I'm a person who has been living with AIDS since 1981. During the early days of the AIDS crisis, many government policies blocked access to essential treatments, much like the U.S. trade policies that are limiting access to essential medicines in the developing world. As members of the Presidential Advisory Council on AIDS, you're in a unique position to raise your voice. If we don't do something, if we don't act now, I think history is going to look back at all of us and find us guilty if we stand by and let 30 to 40 million people die of AIDS during the next decade alone without raising our voices to do something to stop their untimely deaths.
I've been living with HIV. I've had an AIDS diagnosis for 7.5 years. And I'm healthier today than I have been in the last 7 years. And I'm healthy because I have access to treatment.
Treating the more than 3 million AIDS-infected patients in South Africa is a hopeless endeavor. AZT and the newer AIDS drugs that prolong life cost between $500 and $1,000 a month. So 2 years ago, the South African government passed a law that would allow generic versions to be locally produced or imported. But the law never went into effect. Drug companies worldwide took South Africa to court.
The present U.S. policy is to threaten Sub-Saharan African nations who support compulsory licensing and parallel imports, that they might be able to shop around, produce, or find cheaper drugs to get them directly to their people. Any self-respecting government, including our own, under these circumstances, would find such a policy to be fair.
Jackson's really shaken things up in the Congress. They've permitted 2 years of intensive trade pressure on South Africa on these policies, and they haven't raised any voices in opposition. I couldn't find a single letter from a member of Congress supporting the South African government on this dispute. This is important. Medicine, essential medicine. Why are we telling these countries, you can't pass these laws? I talked to somebody from the United States Trade Representative. I asked him, do you think that infection rates of 20% of adult women in South Africa constitutes a public health emergency? So he said to me, I'm not really qualified to answer that question.
I think the question that I really wanted to ask Mr. Jackson, who has been pursuing this issue for a long time, knowing the way that this place works and how slowly it works, is there one particular thing we could do at the moment?
I'll make it real simple. You have to do like emergency stuff, like firemen go into burning buildings and risk their lives. What are you doing in this Africa burning situation?
I think what Bill Clinton did was stupid to have the sex with her. But I never for a minute thought he should be impeached over it, because many of the people who were furious at him for lying about his sex life have been furious with me for telling the truth about mine.
Hi, I'm Eric Sawyer. We met in Washington. I have a document here which I don't know if you've seen, but it was prepared by the State Department. And the title of the memo is Well, the background's important. The U.S. government's efforts to negotiate the repeal or termination of Article 15 of the South Africa Medicines Act. It's a date-by-date campaign where Al Gore actually threatened trade sanctions.
I know. Why don't you get to the question?
But the people here don't. And
well, you can ask them when I'm.
Wait.
You can tell them.
Listen, we're trying to get it. We're trying to get it.
I'm glad to talk to you more about that.
The industry also argues, and many health professionals agree, that cheaper drugs alone are never the answer.
It can make people sicker, not better, and that threatens AIDS patients everywhere around the world.
I am Tom Bombellis. I work for the Pharmaceutical Research and Manufacturers of America, PhRMA. Unfortunately, there are no quick fixes. There is a risk that if pharmaceuticals are not taken correctly, bacteria and viruses will mutate and create powerful new forms of drug-resistant organisms.
This is a concern they share in Zambia. AIDS is punishing this country too. 200 deaths a day. Zambian officials believe it is better to let someone like Veronica die than to give the drugs without the proper supervision.
It's like a death sentence. If you say you should deliberately try and keep drugs away from them, how can you expect millions of people to accept that they're supposed to die without fighting?
Africans are facing extinction. AIDS is wiping up large populations of people.
Mr. Chairman, members of the committee, ladies and gentlemen, I come from Malawi. 20%, as we heard, is infected with the AIDS virus and is dying from it.
We want trade policies to reflect immediate and urgent action of compassion.
These figures also include my brother Michael and his wife who died last year. They left a 2-month-old baby. My sister, she left 4 children. I've lost 3 brother-in-laws, 10 cousins. I've lost so many friends, neighbors. Everybody's dying. I'm supposed to have been dead by now. But Mr. Chairman, if I had not been one of the fortunate who had God's blessing to be able to access these drugs, I simply wouldn't have been here.
And I think it's amazing that here we are now, this is the third time where the community has invited the administration to speak on this issue that they've refused. We cannot get a response from the administration as to...
Paul, be careful. They did not refuse. We just gave them a very late invite.
When was the invite?
Like less than 3 weeks ago. 2 to 3 weeks ago. It really is.
That's not enough lead time.
It's real important to put this in context. I mean, this is months to years away from where we would make a decision.
I don't know which group you're with.
Yeah, I chair the committee, and I doubt it's going to make it to the full council. There was some misconception about this is the first time this issue, compulsory licensing, is getting a hearing with the administration. It's really important for people to understand this is not getting a hearing with Clinton Gore administration.
Right.
And it starts getting kind of out of hand sometimes.
Is that good? Right there? No, it's horrible now. It's coming on right after this. I know. Press record.
This old house is made possible.
That looks fine. It's fuzzy. Have you got this on the right speed?
Yes.
SP?
Yes.
They say people with AIDS, or those who carry the virus, are living longer today. Belinda Dunn tells us how she's coping in her life and what an important role she's playing in educating African Americans.
One of the people at my church worked at AIDS Action, and he said, well, why don't you come to AIDS Action? They're looking for a nurse to do this job. I started doing pre- and post-test counseling. Hi, Luigi. This is Belinda Dunn. And so I went into my wallet to get one of my business cards, and my testing card fell on the floor. And I said, oh, well, while I'm here, let me get my test results. And she had my file in her hand, and she was shaking. And I could see the tears coming into her eyes. She said, did you read it? And at the bottom was the part that says confirmed that I was indeed HIV positive. She was speechless.
You know, I don't think that anybody wakes up one day and suddenly decide that they want to be an addict. I'm a registered nurse by profession, you know, and my first introduction to drugs was when I was in nursing school. I was addicted to cocaine. I was addicted to alcohol. I'm ashamed to say that I took my patients' medications to trade it in for my drug of choice. But there was a little voice inside of me, and that little voice I think that all of your clients have, that I am worthy and that I am going to live the best life that I possibly can.
This week, we are in the trenches of our 10th annual Black Church Week of Prayer for the Healing of AIDS. And we started with 50 churches 10 years ago, and today we are 5,000 churches strong across the country talking about HIV from the pulpit, doing education programs. And someone needs to say amen. 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 10 years ago when we started, I think the community was really struggling. I found myself at Harlem Hospital as an AIDS administrator and saw Black people dying with HIV with no spiritual support. And you know, I just got an idea how to mobilize the churches around HIV, and that was an event called the Harlem Week of Prayer for the Healing of AIDS. We now call that the Black Church Week of Prayer for the Healing of AIDS 10 years later.
Come on now, come on, come on.
The church is our #1 arm of activism. We come to life through our spiritual belief and understanding. And the Balm in Gilead, we try to align the two together. And so we have a theological document and an HIV document. So the writing is putting the two together. So we're putting AIDS education into a scriptural context. Although there were ministers who were not certainly ready, I didn't dwell on them because I was really going for those who were ready, who were really ready to tackle this epidemic using prayer and education. The event outgrew itself, and we had to take on an organization.
Now, who was we back then?
We was me. We was Cecile. When I would go to a minister, I would knock on this door and say, you know, Pastor, we are having the Harlem Week of Prayer for the Healing of AIDS. But in fact, we was Cecile.
And all of a sudden, this certain woman, say it with me, a certain woman.
A certain woman.
See, I like that because they don't give our name. There's a certain woman. And a certain woman which had an issue of blood 12 years.
Now, come on.
She was no better than the day she went to the doctor. And it's been all that she had, and no one could help her.
Last year, I went on the AIDS drugs, and my doctor didn't feel like I fit the protocol to test me for hepatitis C. Now I have 40% liver loss. I cannot take the medicine for liver disease, and I can't take the medicine for HIV.
And when she had heard of Jesus, she began to press her way through the crowd. For she said, if I may touch but his clothes, I'll be made whole.
We are focusing too much on what people cannot do. If I listened to what somebody said to me that what I couldn't do, I wouldn't be standing here. I have spoke from the outhouse to the White House. You don't give me what I want, you don't give me my needs, I'm see ya. And then I'm gonna go on TV and talk about you.
She hooked on. She didn't put on his clothes, but she grabbed his spirit, her strength, her hunger, her desire that's drew to when she got through drawing from him. He said, somebody touch me.
When we talk about harm reduction, we're talking about individuals' lives that are fragmented like this. And we have to begin to bring it together like that. Even a small step of change means a difference in someone's life. If you can change a person's attitudes, you can change their beliefs, and you certainly can change their behaviors. Behaviors are what put people at risk for HIV.
Jesus looked at her and said, I haven't seen no greater faith. Says, done. It's done, woman.
My life turned around. God had forgiven me for all the things that have happened in my life, and I believed it. That was 9 years ago. So when people tell me that people can't get clean, that person is not worth the time and pain that you go through to bring them from where they were, I tell them they need to go and work in another field. Nobody is a throwaway person, no matter how long they've been out
there. The healing was in Jesus, but the healing in her releasing her faith and believe that Jesus could heal her. Now, what are you talking about, Pastor? I'm gonna tell you what I'm talking about. When we that have a condition, it makes no difference what the doctor have said and what is the diagnosis. Doctor told Sister Dawn, we don't know all we can do, and there's no hope. Man, honey, you in the best condition it is. Limitation is God's opportunity to do something.
As much as I speak and I'm open, that sometimes I just don't want to have this disease. I just don't want to talk about it, and I just don't want to be inside of my skin.
She's really, maybe for the first time, noticing a continued problem. She's having ongoing ascites, fluid in her abdomen, and so she's noticing that all the time, and it's got her scared. Come around, you know, if you're forgetting things that I said. Oh, okay, all right, good.
It's so important to have a good relationship with your primary care.
I'm hopeful. I think there are things we can still do for her that may have good effects, and I hope the fact that I'm hopeful will keep her hopeful.
Today, this subcommittee will address the global HIV/AIDS epidemic and the role of the United States in combating this terrible affliction. Part of that is linked to our trade policy, and part of that is also linked to our health policy.
I never saw this as a struggle for AIDS. My support and my passion for Africa is that I am an African American, and the United States government has never done right by African people. A State Department report, for which we are all too familiar with now, explains how the U.S. government engaged to pressure South Africa to change provisions of the Medicines Act that give the government the authority to pursue compulsory licensing and parallel import policies. The United States has also threatened to withhold trade benefits and threatened trade sanctions. And even the chairman in his opening statement acknowledged that this issue is a trade issue. The founding of the Congressional Black Caucus has its basis in long-felt desires that if African Americans would ever get to the Congress, that they might be able to offer up something for their homeland, to treat Africa like Europe, to treat it like other parts of the world.
Let me begin by expressing my great appreciation to all of the men and women of our community across the country that have rallied in short order to make Human Rights Opportunity Partnership and Empowerment for Africa a reality. Everybody repeat after me. Keep hope. Keep hope. Alive. Alive. Keep hope. Keep hope. Alive. Alive. Keep hope. Keep hope. Alive.
With the advent of a Republican majority, what was once a comprehensive Marshall Plan for Africa and trading approach has essentially become the Africa Growth and Opportunity Act.
Every World AIDS Day, AIDS activists have candlelight vigils and prayers and things like that to mourn the deaths and the dying in Africa. But up until this point, we didn't know quite what to do about it. So along comes these two trade bills.
The good bill is the Hope for Africa Act, sponsored by Jesse Jackson Jr. And then you have the Africa Growth and Opportunity Act, which is pushed by the Clinton administration, the Republican leadership, most major multinational corporations, but also the drug companies.
The average African family only earns $500 per year.
Governments in Africa, they don't make that much money. And a lot of the money they do make goes to pay off a huge debt that they've acquired.
And so they've developed these structural adjustment policies which dictate how much has to go back to repay debt.
And this Africa Growth and Opportunity Act is saying, well, you got to increase that amount of money. You got to slash the spending on health and education.
Which ends up with financial institutions loaning them more money on repaying just interest.
And the Hope for Africa Act calls for the full cancellation of the African debt.
Our government has got to stop using the debt to make more room for more businesses while they go there to exploit. That is not right and it's not fair.
And frankly, we're facing a very uphill battle on this bill because so many forces you would expect to be on our side are on the wrong side, including, by the way, Representative Charles Rangel from Harlem. There's been a real effort to split the Black Caucus in Congress, and I don't know where they all stand, but they're definitely not all with their colleague, Jesse Jackson Jr.
When you have a problem with access to AIDS drugs or any other kind of drugs, it's an obvious candidate. What are you going to do about compulsory licensing? And there was a provision in the Jesse Jackson bill to protect the right of countries to do both compulsory licensing and parallel imports.
We kind of pushed the envelope. Were you at the markup today?
At first, people weren't sure if this was a good idea. They thought, well, this is too new to the trade debate. All these guys were working on issues about textiles and debt relief and other issues.
2nd District of Illinois, Congressman Jackson's office. Okay, what's your name, ma'am?
Well, the minute it was part of the bill, Congress began to hear from people in the ACT UP community and the AIDS community about this provision. And it began to explain the difference between the Hope bill and the Crane-Rangel bill.
We still have busloads of people coming here today from Philadelphia. They're coming from Baltimore and other parts of Maryland. And they're here from all parts of New York and New York City. We are people living with HIV and their supporters. And we will not be silent as long as there is a single unnecessary death anywhere in this globe from HIV.
Coming back to Philly, you know, a lot of folks that are on Health Choices HMO or something like that, we get kind of lousy health care. If you live in Sub-Saharan Africa, in many places, the huge majority of people with AIDS, they don't get any drugs because the drug companies figure they can make more money by selling at very high prices to a few.
Now let me just hit the point home for people. Clinton threatened Nelson Mandela, and this bill, Jesse Jackson Jr.'s bill, would prohibit putting any pressure on a country trying to exercise its rights under international law.
When I heard about this coalition, I had my other co-coordinator with me, and we said we have to sign on to this. This is just too important. I'm a person living with AIDS, and I also have a daughter that's positive. For over 22 million people not to even have essential medications, you just feel helpless. You want to do something and you don't know what to do.
Compulsory licensing, it'll cut the cost to 1/10 or 1/100th.
The Clinton administration and the promoters of the African Growth and Opportunity Act in Congress will tell you that we are trying to violate the law by stealing patents. Now I will tell you the truth. International patent law, according to the TRIPS agreement, means that it is perfectly legal to do compulsory licensing and parallel imports. And I'm saying let Africa do what they need to keep their people alive.
This sounds like an atrocity to me, that they actually had the knowledge to save a life and more. If it was Europe or Japan or Australia, I don't think they would have as much difficulty in relinquishing this stuff as they are right now. And then the statistics that's pathetic. 12 million people. It's crazy, and I'm glad to be a part of it. I'm glad you're giving us the opportunity to be a part of this thing.
Let's have a moment of silence for the over 12 million Africans who have already died of AIDS. And a moment of silence for those we have lost to this epidemic in the United States. May we honor your memories and spirits with our actions today.
I had no idea of the compassion until I began to see it that day at that rally. At that moment, I knew that there was an even more compelling reason to support the Hope Bill than the reasons I myself had articulated. And there were that millions of people were dying and couldn't afford and get pharmaceuticals, and that reason alone gave our bill another level of moral authority.